Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a massive question, one that feels like it's straight out of science fiction, but is getting more and more backing from actual science. Can your mind really, truly shape the world around you? So let's start with a word we all know, probably from magic shows, right? But its origin has nothing to do with pulling a rabbit out of a hat. No, it's way, way more profound than that.
As I speak, I create. Just think about that for a second. This ancient idea that our words literally build our reality is the core concept behind a huge modern self-help movement. So what's really going on here?
Well, a lot of motivational speakers today will tell you that you are basically a magician. You're constantly casting spells out into the world with your thoughts and your words, whether you even realize you're doing it or not.
And proponents of this idea, they'll point to our language itself as proof. I mean, think about it. It's no accident we call it spelling when we arrange letters to make words. The whole idea is that your words are these incredibly powerful spells. They can build you up, or if you're not careful, they can totally tear you down.
There's this classic metaphor that just puts it perfectly. Your mind is a garden, and your thoughts are the seeds. You just can't plant seeds of doubt and negativity and then expect a life of success and happiness to magically grow. It's like planting strawberry seeds and getting angry when you don't get tomatoes. And that really brings us to the million-dollar question. It's a beautiful idea, it feels right, but is it just a nice metaphor? Or is there any actual hard science to back this stuff up? Well, according to Stanford psychologist Alia Crum, our minds are anything but passive observers. She argues they are active participants that are literally changing our physical reality. And the most famous example of this, the placebo effect. Okay, you have to see this. In one incredible study, researchers gave two groups the exact same milkshake. But here's the twist. They told one group it was a super high-calorie, indulgent shake, and they told the other group it was a low-calorie, sensible one. The results were just wild. The indulgent group didn't just feel more full, their bodies physically reacted as if they'd had more calories. Their levels of ghrelin, that's the hunger hormone, literally plummeted. And this effect goes way beyond just hunger. A huge Johns Hopkins study found that people who had a family history of heart disease but kept a positive outlook were a full 1/3 less likely to have a heart attack. This is massive. It shows your mindset isn't just in your head, it creates real, measurable, physical changes in your body. Now let's zoom out. Beyond just our moment-to-moment thoughts, psychologists are finding that the bigger story you tell yourself about your life has a massive impact on your well-being. It turns out we're all walking around as the authors of our own story. So Northwestern professor Dan McAdams has found there are basically two ways we frame our lives. There's a contamination story, where something good happens, but then it gets ruined, sending your life's plot on a downward spiral. But then there's the redemption story. That's when something bad happens, but it ultimately leads to a positive change, an upward trajectory. The story of the pianist Leon Fleischer is just a perfect example of this. He had this brilliant career that was suddenly cut short by a hand injury. I mean, that's a classic setup for a contamination story, right? But he didn't see it that way. He reframed it. He became a conductor, a teacher. And that whole period of reinvention is what led to this triumphant return to the stage decades later. The tragedy became the setup for his redemption. And here is the absolute key, the major takeaway from all this research. People don't start telling these redemption stories because they already feel better. It's the opposite. The very act of changing the story seems to be what causes the improvement in well-being. Okay, so if changing our mindset and our life story has such a huge impact, how in the world is that actually happening inside our brains? Neurosurgeon James Doty explains that it's all about how we program our brain's subconscious networks.
You can kind of think of it like a three-part team inside your head. First, you've got your default mode network. That's the dreamer. It's where you imagine what you want. Once that goal is set, your salience network kicks in. It's like a scout or a bloodhound, constantly scanning your environment for anything related to that goal. And finally, you have your executive control network. That's the driver, the part that actually takes action when the scout finds something.
You have definitely experienced your salience network in action. You know that thing where you learn a new word or you buy a certain kind of car and then suddenly you see it everywhere? Well, there aren't actually more of those cars on the road. It's just that your brain's scout has been given a new target to look for. And this is really the neurological basis for that whole spelling idea. When you focus your mind, you're literally telling your brain what to go out and find in the world. But here's the catch.
To get this internal team working for you, your brain has to be in the right state. When you're all stressed out, your fight or flight system takes over and it shuts down creative thinking to focus on pure survival. To really see new possibilities, you need to activate your rest and digest system. That creates a state of calm that allows your brain to make new connections and spot all those opportunities your scout is looking for.
All right, now this is where we need to be really, really careful. The psychological and neurological effects we've been talking about, they're real. They're backed by solid research. But a lot of people try to explain why it works by borrowing, or let's be honest, misusing, concepts from a totally different field, quantum physics.
You've probably heard this kind of thing before, especially with the law of attraction. The claim is that your thoughts literally send out a physical frequency or vibration into the universe, and that frequency then attracts things with a similar frequency back to you.
So what do actual physicists think about that? Well, on forums like Reddit, their response is, blunt. They call the idea not even wrong. And what that means is that it's such a nonsensical jumble of scientific-sounding words that you can't even form a theory to test it. It's just gibberish.
From a physics perspective, it's simple. Thoughts are electrochemical signals inside your brain. They don't send out magic waves that change the universe. And that observer effect from quantum mechanics that people always bring up, it has nothing to do with a person consciously looking at something. It just means the very act of measuring something that tiny will inevitably change it. Okay, so let's bring all this home. The real power you have to shape your reality isn't about quantum physics or magical vibrations. It's about psychology and neuroscience. You can't just think $1 million into your bank account, but you can absolutely rewire your brain to see opportunities and take actions that you were completely blind to before.
And you can start putting this into practice today. First, just figure out what your current story is. What are the beliefs that hold you back? Second, start taking small, consistent actions that line up with the person you actually want to be. Third, actively start reframing your challenges as part of a redemption story. And finally, you gotta be patient with yourself. This is a practice. It's not a one-and-done fix. You're gonna have setbacks. Just keep going.
So in the end, the science is really clear. You can't control every single thing that happens to you, but you have an incredible amount of power to control the meaning you give to those events. And why does that matter so much? Because the story you tell yourself isn't just a story. It becomes the blueprint for the life you actually live.